Hello, story lovers and history buffs. Welcome to another episode of the Chuchu Blema Sunny podcast with me, Buki. How's it going? I hope you're having a great week. January dragged her beautiful butt slowly along, and finally, we are in February. Happy new month. May it be fruitful, may it be good to us, and may it make us joyful. Eshe. We've finally been able to get a channel for Chuchu Blema up and working on YouTube. The at is at Chuchu Blema Sunny Podcast. Like us, leave comments for us, and subscribe to us. Thank you. We'd love to get our subscribers up so more people can get to see our content suggested to them. The main point of this podcast is to continue the art of oral storytelling, and the tales I tell on here are my own versions of stories that have been told for decades all over Africa. Today, we're headed down to the southern part of our lovely continent, and we're telling the tale of the man who never lied. In my version, I've made the character a girl, and I will be tying it in with the topic of the roles women played traditionally as healers on the continent before colonization. I've titled it Seeing is Believing, Busi's Gift. Okay, let's get into it. There once lived a woman who couldn't tell a lie. We'll call her Busiswa, Busi for short. Busi was born in her village one stormy night to a herbalist named Nomalanga. In a time where home births were not considered new age, she delivered Busi by herself when no one else could make it through the storm to see her. Her father, Sanele, the town crier, had been in another village making an announcement. When he returned a week later, he named her Busiswa, meaning wisdom. Busi's mother was already quite popular before she had Busi. A healer and midwife, she delivered most of the babies in their village and often cooked herbs for sick villagers from far and wide. Busi was a curious and precocious child in love with the botany of her land and stayed by her mother's side watching her make concoctions until she was old enough to help. As a teenager, she quickly became known for her sharp wit and honesty. She became her mother's intern, making herbal medicine of her own, and also helped her father with weather predictions for farmers and travelers. By the time she was in her early 20s, she was known as a wise woman, and people often came to her with problems knowing she had the best solutions and advice. Most of the villagers enjoyed what they called Busi's gifts, but a few who knew they could never be the bad gal she was plotted against her and fed the ruler of their land lies that soon made the king see her as a threat. We established the ruler of their village, King Tim, short for Timorous. He was a spoiled prince who ascended the throne when his father died in his early teens. Known as a wicked wag and considered more annoying than your average YouTube prankster, he would put people to the test unnecessarily for laughs and entertainment. He always took the joke too far, and he never knew when to quit. One day, two of the palace hands were gossiping outside. That Busi is a good lass. She helped Nifo with his farm the other day. He could have lost all his crops if she hadn't predicted the flood. Yes, yes, the girl is wise, a woman of her word. A woman like that would be a great leader in our land. And what is this nonsense? They suddenly heard from behind them. It was the king. You seem to have a lot of time on your hands. Maybe you need a task set for you. They both got on their knees and began to beg him for mercy. First, go and get this girl you speak of, and when you get back, we can think of an interesting punishment for both of you, King Timorous said, a wicked smile spreading across his face. We cut to Busi, who knew this day was sure to arrive. So when the two palace hands got to her house, she set the herbal concoction she had been working on down and told the men to give her a minute. She'd come with them. Nomalanga pressed an amulet of protection into her daughter's hand and hugged her. They said a prayer together. She told her mother she would be back soon and set off for the palace. Busi got to the palace and the king was seated waiting for her. King Tim sized her up, ready to engage in some buffoonery because that's what he loved best.
Busi the wise woman,
King Tim said. Unnerved by Busi's presence, he intended to hide behind sarcasm and nagging to shake her foundation.
Busi the wise one, is it true you have never lied?
It's true. Busi's confident answer annoyed King Tim further.
And you are sure you will never lie in your life?
He asked, failing at projecting the image of unbothered he so badly sought to portray. Busi nodded.
Okay, tell the truth, but be careful. The lie is cunning and it gets on your tongue easily,
The king said, ominously. Busi was not threatened by the cliche made up quote. The king ordered her to stay with them for a week. She accepted and sent word home to her parents so they wouldn't worry, and was shown to her room. We cut to Busi's house as the messenger leaves. We knew this day would come, Sanele said. Nomalanga nodded, and they began planning for the worst case scenario. The next day, the king took Busi hunting. When they returned, he told her to take the meat to the kitchen and tell the queen to instruct the kitchen staff to prepare a big dinner for them. They sat and made merry, and the king tried plying Busi with lots of nklumboti, but he himself was too drunk to execute his plan properly, and she left for her room once he had been carted away to his by some of his men. The next morning, he summoned Busi and told her he was going on a hunt with his servants for the tastiest buffalo he could find. He then ordered her to tell the queen to make preparations for a feast for all the subjects in the kingdom. When Busi left to the queen as he'd instructed, he burst into laughter.
There will be no feast tomorrow, and Busi's first lie will be born. The first of many lies I will trick her to tell.
Busi knew that man was on crud, and when she got to the queen, said to her, Look, your man said there might be a feast tomorrow if he goes hunting, but he may or may not go because you know that man is a troll. Not in these exact words, but something to that effect. The queen, who clearly didn't know her husband by then, went about planning the do. The next day, the whole town gathered in the large palace dining hall and waited for the king to bring the buffalo for the feast. Busi sat next to her parents, who arrived happy to see her in one piece. After hours of waiting, people started leaving with their empty stomachs, and the king finally walked into the large dining hall. He first acted as though he was shocked to see the party. The queen, furious, told him what Busi had said to her. The king chuckled.
Busi has told her first lie.
Busi stood immediately from the table and asked the queen if she should be so gracious as to repeat exactly what she has said. The queen, now remembering that Busi had said maybe, reiterated what she said. I told no lies, Busi said. Timorous became angry and commanded Busi be thrown in a dungeon for her lie. No, Sanele said, standing immediately. One by one, the townspeople all stood up, forming a protective line in front of Busi. Ah, Timoros, the evil you have done is enough, Nomalanga said. The palace guards joined the townspeople, and seeing he was outnumbered, King Tim fled with his wife, running close behind him. The people celebrated, and Busi was crowned ruler of the kingdom. Many years to come, she brought prosperity to the village and opened the first medical center that was headed by her mother Nomalanga. No one ever laid eyes on Timorous or his wife ever again. Her wise counsel was sought by people across the land, and true to her word, she never lied till the day she died. I added the parts about the town helping Busi to highlight what a united community can do together. I made the king more tyrannical than in the original story. A powerful man who had the time to trick people into lying, I feel, would not have appreciated being upstaged. And it seemed very appropriate for the character. I added the parents. In the original story, Mamad is a wise older man and his parents aren't in the story. Let's get into the versions that have been told over time. The most popular one is this version. Once upon a time, there lived a wise man by the name of Mamad. He never lied. All the people in the land, even the ones who lived 20 days away, knew about him. The king heard about Mamad and ordered his subjects to bring him to the palace. He looked at the wise man and asked,
Mamad, is it true that you have never lied?
"It's true.
And you will never lie in your life?
I'm sure about that."
Okay, tell the truth, but be careful. The lie is cunning and gets on your tongue easily.
Several days passed and the king called Mamad once again. There was a big crowd. The king was about to go hunting. He held his horse by the mane. His left foot was already in the stirrup. He ordered Mamad,
Go to my summer palace and tell the queen I will be with her for lunch. Tell her to prepare a big feast. You will have lunch with me then.
Mamad bowed down and went to the queen. Then the king laughed and said,
We won't go hunting, and now Mamad will lie to the queen. Tomorrow we will laugh on his behalf.
But the wise Mamad went to the palace and said, "Maybe you should prepare a big feast for lunch tomorrow, and maybe you shouldn't. Maybe the king will come by noon, and maybe he won't." "Tell me, will he come or won't he?" asked the queen. "I don't know whether he put his right foot on the stirrup or he put his left foot on the ground after I left." Everybody waited for the king. He came the next day and said to the queen,
The white Mamad who never lies lied to you yesterday.
but the queen told him about the words of Mamad. And the king realized that the wise man never lies and says only that which he saw with his own eyes. I found this version online at the anikefoundation.org. Another version on the Word and Sorcery blog is very similar to this version, except for the king sending spies to Mamad's house to see if he'd tell a lie. When he didn't, and they'd spied on him for several months, the king planned the hunt. Most of the other versions followed the same format, some changing his name, and like I said before, it's known as just an African tale, even though some research brought up countries like South Africa, Tanzania, and Nigeria as the origins of where the story comes from. The Nigerian version is also very similar to the one I just told, sans it starting out like this. In a tiny village in what is now Nigeria lived a man named Mamad. He was an honest man. He also never lied. Everyone in and around his village had heard about him. His fame had spread along the entire country. Mamad was known as the man who never lies. In time, news of Mamad reached the king's ears. The king was a jealous man. He did not like the fact that there was someone in his kingdom who was getting attention. The same sequence of events ensue, and the king, realizing that he had been caught at his own game, invites Mamad and makes him his advisor because he believed that such a man would be valuable in his council. The moral lesson behind this tale is only to speak to what you've seen. Hearsay is generally not something you can trust, and people lie all the time and will get you involved in their lies and their mess without thinking about it twice. Like, I feel like even in this age, we consider loyalty to be somebody who doesn't question any of your actions, or most people consider loyalty to be a person being loyal to you being a person who never questions any of your actions. Most people will say you're not loyal to them if you don't agree with their every word and everything that they do. And in my opinion, a loyal person will never watch you self destruct without saying a word. And loyalty is in no way being a yes man. And that is not to say that anybody is perfect and can judge others, but I think that we should really rely on one another to be able to hear the truth from one another. Like, I should be able to rely on somebody who I say is loyal to me to tell me the truth when I'm messing up, as opposed to just being like, "Oh yeah, go ahead, girl, do your thing." Like, yes, yes, look at you setting yourself on fire. I love to see that. Like, no, no, thank you. That is not what loyalty to me is anyway. And I think we are all allowed to define things the way we want to. What I see as a pretty solid lesson with this one is only speak to what you've seen with your own two eyes. The role women played in the medical field in Africa and honestly around the whole world over before patriarchal systems were reinforced and men like Heinrich Kramer started his witch hunt and published the Malleus Maleficarum is hidden in an effort to minimize the more dominant roles women held. The ownership of women became all the rage when we moved from our hunter gatherer lifestyle and invented agriculture. The submissive stereotype that certain people fantasize over is a false narrative that is pushed and widely accepted because most people don't know any better or because it doesn't benefit them to accept the truth. African women were herbalists, traditional birth attendants, and healers. They were a major part of traditional medical practices in the African health system. They were carers and healers before Western medicine was foisted upon us, and generally they were just pushed out of that workforce, and it became male dominated. I'm going to do a whole episode on this, but I need to do way more research and maybe even get some interviews for our Patreon. And we've set up a Patreon, but we'll talk about that at the end of the show. As an African, if you're supporting Trump simply because you hate LGBTQ plus people, or you've consumed enough red pill content that you believe the ever changing place of women in this society is a threat, then I know there'll probably be no changing your mind. But I will give you a little something to think about, or not. It's your choice. Other than the fact that he's withdrawn from the WHO and freezing foreign aid, removing over $1 billion of funding for Africa off the table, yes, it would be great if we didn't even need to rely as heavily on foreign aid as we do, but we do. The suppression of any group that doesn't cause any harm to our society by their way of living, then turning around to protect the ones that do, the rapists, the pedos, and the misogynists. Just know that oppression is a tool used by people in power to control us and to other us from one another. One day, the oppression you're championing because you think it has nothing to do with you will be the same tool used against you. The people in power use our differences as tools against us, making us feel as though we are on opposite sides of the battlefield when we are actually in the same fight. If you're not struggling as a Ghanaian with this global recession that's affecting everyone in the world, then good for you. There are people starving without two pennies to rub together. And this next tier, where it's like one day you're okay and the next small, small hunger they catch, is not it. The harder things get, The angrier and more aggressive everyone is, and we stay distracted from the basic needs we struggle for access to. It's not about adopting lifestyles you don't think you see yourself in, but being able to connect with our empathy enough not to other ourselves from one another over minor differences. We can't see past them because we're in a perpetual state of discontent. When I think back to the times this country was more stable when I was younger, never saying it was perfect, we always have had our problems. But when there wasn't nationwide hardship, our differences didn't cause this much hate amongst one another. Teasing someone for being different was the most the person did, not this angry vitriol I see being spewed day in and day out. We need to find a way to bridge the gap and unite against the oppression that is actually our problem. And I feel like we would be able to see these things if we were not in this constant spiral of not even being able to provide basic needs for ourselves. I hope things get better for us. And I hope that we're able to connect with ourselves enough to see ourselves in one another instead of seeing this enemy that you need to stand up against. Yeah, that's the end of my rant. We've come to the end of another episode of the Choo Choo Blema Sunny podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. We will be bringing you episodes bi weekly on Wednesdays. You can follow us on Instagram at TBS Daily underscore AFT or email us at chuchublemassunny at gmail.com. We'd love to hear any other versions of the stories you hear on here or just any other thoughts you have. You can also send in your original short stories and they will be featured on the pod. We've set up a Patreon for our subscribers that are looking for more exclusive content, behind the scenes interviews, one on one live chats with the team, shout outs, and early drops of our episodes. In Ochienyo, we'll be making a switch to some history and I'll tell you the story of my grandmother, my mother's mom, Comfort Asamoah. She was one of the first women MPs in Ghana during Nkrumah's government. We'll map out the story of her life and her walk to independence in two parts. I'm excited about that episode because my grandma was a baddie, and it will be a delight to share her life with you. The show is produced by Nikita Kowalski. The stories are collected, researched, written, and read by Kabuki Akumi. Show music by Andre Ayete, and I am the orator of today's story. Thank you for listening, and until next time, tree blow. Take it easy. This has been the Choo Choo Blema Sunny podcast, sharing truly African stories.